Welcome to Part 7 of Stanwick of Scotland Yard. Visit brooksaudiobooks.com for an awesome collection of unique, full-length audiobooks. And be sure to subscribe to be notified when new books are released. Chapter 19. Conclusion. There is little left to recount. When Gwen Kitteredge, known to Stanwick as Mrs. James Sibley, saw how things had unfolded from the cabin, she decided to surrender. It turned out there were no other members of the gang, and by morning all 4 prisoners were securely locked in their cells. Armed with new information, Stanwick wasted no time in launching a thorough investigation into their crimes, and soon enough the complete details of the counterfeiting operation came to light. It seemed Jim Sibley had long believed in the potential for profit from counterfeiting silver coins. He thought he could manage it, even with coins made of nearly pure silver, but the passing of the Act of 1920, which reduced the silver content to 50%, and the subsequent drop in silver prices confirmed his suspicions. After being dismissed from the Mint, he felt it was the perfect time to test his theories. However, one major obstacle stood in his way. He lacked the capital needed to launch his scheme. For a while his plans stalled, but then he discovered a way. Through some questionable acquaintances, he'd heard of a man named Curtis Welland, who later referred to himself as Hervey Westinghouse. Welland, as he came to be known, was considered a remarkable success in the underworld. Whispers suggested he made his living through blackmail and had occasionally paid large sums for jobs, primarily breaking into the homes of prominent individuals to acquire valuable letters. Sibley figured that if Welland could be interested in his venture, the necessary funding would appear. He introduced himself, gauged Welland's interest, and to make a long story short, the partnership of Sibley, and Welland was formed. When they sat down to sort out the details, they realized they needed a 4th member. Once again, Welland stepped in to fill the gap. He brought in a man named Webster, who would later be known as Style. Due to an issue with the signature on a check, Style had given up his freedom to Welland and was now directed on what he must do. Reluctantly, Style joined the group, and the quartet began their work. They ordered the necessary machines to several ports under the names of various foreign medal-making companies, intended to be held until called for. Under the pretense of representing these foreign firms, Style obtained the machines, supposedly to arrange their shipment. In truth, he drove them to a house near Guildford that had been rented by the Sibleys. Since they needed a way to purchase silver without drawing attention in the trade, they acquired a silversmith's workshop, with Style taking on the role of manager. All the employees who showed any intelligence were let go, retaining only enough to keep the place running. Style bought silver under the name Theobald and Grudgeon and discreetly transferred what Sibley needed to his garage, driving it back to Guildford in his car. The facade of being an author allowed Sibley to withdraw for long periods each day, and his wife assisted him in producing the coins. It was deemed too risky for either of them or Style to participate in the distribution, so Welland took on that responsibility in the manner Stanwick had already uncovered. Each morning and evening, while traveling along a quiet back road, Style changed his license plate and modified his appearance by slipping in a different set of false teeth, brushing his hair and moustache differently, and donning glasses and a differently shaped hat. Thanks to these precautions, as well as the fact that Stanwick had described Welland's grey car instead of Style's green one in his earlier bulletins, he successfully managed to avoid recognition. It was part of Style's role to spend a considerable amount of time watching the 4 box office girls they had unintentionally deceived. Stanwick's inquiries quickly reached the gang's ears. Welland immediately recognized the trick involving the broken window, making the gang realize they were in serious trouble. They decided to halt the production of coins while Sibley and his wife, both in disguise, kept an eye on the girls. Stanwick's meeting with Marley in the Charing Cross Gardens soon came to their attention, and they understood they were on the brink of being discovered. They quickly sent a message to Style, instructing him to provide Welland with good coins for the girls. Style kept a stash in his safe for this purpose, and handed over genuine bundles to Welland, replacing them with 4 counterfeit lots he had brought to the city. This is how the coins Stanwick obtained from Marley turned out to be real, while those he discovered in Styles' safe were fakes. The outcome the quartet faced was something they had anticipated and prepared for. Their plan was that if England became too dangerous, they would shift their operations to France. Welland had already purchased a launch, which he stored at Ryde. However, they were determined not to leave without their equipment, and preparations for its removal were underway when the entire situation changed due to Marley recognizing Style at the silversmith's. Style realized that if Marley spoke to Stanwick again, their fate would be sealed. Stanwick would follow the trail right to their hideout in Guildford before they could relocate their setup. Consequently, Style decided to kidnap her to buy time for their operation. The option of silencing her like others who had tried to reach Scotland Yard was weighed carefully, but ultimately her life was spared as a last-ditch hope. If by some unlikely chance Stanwick were to discover their escape before they got away, Marley would be put on display, and Stanwick would be warned that if he tried to stop them, she would be shot right then and there, cold-blooded. They believed this threat might be enough to make him hesitate and give them the chance to carry out their plan. By the evening of the day Marley was taken, all their preparations for the getaway were in place, and had they left then, they likely would have been successful. However, an unforeseen snag at the last moment delayed them for 2 days and ultimately led to their downfall. Welland discovered he couldn't start the engine of the launch, costing them 2 crucial days in Ryde to fix the issue. Figuring out how to transfer their equipment from the car to the launch turned out to be one of their toughest challenges. They couldn't use a wharf and crane due to the need for secrecy, and they weren't aware of any natural harbor or rock from which they could load the machines. So they settled on a spot along Southampton Water, one of the few hards on a shore of soft, marshy flats. At low tide, they drove the car down to the beach, unloaded and buoyed the machines, and then, when the tide rose, floated the launch to that spot and hoisted the equipment aboard. 2 trips with the car were needed to move all their gear, the second being the one when they took Marley. When they returned to the shore the second time, the remaining machines were unloaded, and everyone except Style had gone on board. While waiting for the tide to rise high enough to lift the machines, Style used the time to create a further diversion. To throw off any pursuers, he drove the car into Southampton, and it was while he was walking back after abandoning it that he ran into Stanwick and his group. Though Stanwick easily uncovered all these details, he struggled more to prove the gang's responsibility for Thurza Smithson's murder. Eventually, he managed to do that as well. The attendant at the Milan identified Gwen Kitteredge as the young woman who had sought out Thurza on the night she disappeared, and Dr. Lappin from Lyon the Solent testified that Style fit the description of the man working on the engine of the grey car on the road near Hill Head. This evidence, combined with the other information Stanwick had gathered, secured a guilty verdict, and ultimately all 4 of the accused faced justice, Welland and Sibley on the scaffold, and the other 2 with life sentences. Before he was executed, Welland made a complete confession, admitting that he and Sibley had murdered all 3 girls in the horrifying and grotesque manner Style had threatened Marley. Following the example of Smith, the brides in the Bath murderer, they had drowned their unfortunate victims in the bath at the house in Guildford before disposing of the bodies in the quarry, the river, and the sea, respectively. Of all involved, Marley was the most fortunate. Not only was she not prosecuted, but because the amount in question was unknown, the issue of her ill-gotten gains was never pursued. Morally questionable as it was, she ended up with almost £400 as her share of the grim affair. As for Stanwick, the sense of a job well, if slowly, done was his reward. The case had been particularly troublesome and disappointing, but he took satisfaction in knowing that he had likely saved Marley Moran's life, and the lives of other girls who might have fallen victim to the gang, as well as rid the community of a dangerous group whose removal was vital for the safety of the entire country. The End. This concludes Stanwick of Scotland Yard, by Merrick Sharp, narrated by Chris Michelson. Published by BrooksAudiobooks.com. All rights reserved. No portion of this audiobook may be reproduced in any form without written permission of the publisher. Visit brooksaudiobooks.com for an awesome collection of unique, full-length audiobooks, and be sure to subscribe to be notified when new books are released.